So everybody, thank you again for joining us to our second Code Clinic. We have today a return guest. Arnold from our previous session has jumped on the opportunity when a slot opened yesterday and registered for an additional patient consult. So we'll start with Arnold, and afterwards we have Hima, who is in our New York City Developer User Group, one of our longtime members, who also wants some help. So we'll just get started with Arnold. And as we did last time, please keep yourself muted, but this is a collaborative effort. So if you have questions on things that you see, or if you have comments or things to add, please do not hesitate to just jump in. Of course, try not to interrupt people, but we value any opinion, questions, or additional information. We have today with us Luke Kushanik, who is also a Salesforce MVP. And Luke, thank you for joining us again. And I appreciate having a second eye watching over the nonsense that I sometimes blurb.
My pleasure, and hopefully I'll be error-free this week, unlike last week.
It's okay. You had me doubt myself, so that's valuable, I guess.
And I'll also be actively Googling for references and information that comes up during the meeting. So I'll sort of be our researcher.
Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So Arnold sent me some information, and Arnold, I'll state your problem, and please correct me if I'm saying anything incorrect. So Arnold has a developer org here that he has given me access into. And as you can see on the contact object, there's a whole bunch of triggers here. A bunch of them are inactive, as you can see on the status here, and 3 of them are active. We can see right away that one of them is actually a managed package trigger. With managed package triggers, there's really nothing that we can do. That means we can't see the code, we can't deactivate them, we can't change anything in how they operate. We just have to leave them be. But with that said, there are a handful of triggers here, specifically this prefill, FF prefill, and this other FF prefill, and this contact trigger that Arnold said, hey, I have 3 triggers that are working on the contact object, and I know that Salesforce best practice is to have 1 trigger per object. Maybe I can go ahead and merge them into 1 trigger. Is that a true statement, Arnold, so far?
Yeah, I guess the only color I would add is we have an ETL process into the contact object that's trying to push batches of 10,000, and we're struggling to get it to fly. And one of the things that's killing us is execution context. So in our production org, there's actually even 1 more managed package trigger that doesn't appear here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an effort to, and because every time a trigger fires, it's going to reevaluate workflow rules and reevaluate validation rules. The execution context is being pretty much spent, and we're getting timeout errors where batches take more than 10 minutes. We're getting CPU time limit errors. So I'm just looking at what there is and saying if I combine these 3, I should be able to, when you look at the debug context,
mm-hmm.
I can already see between my production org and this org that when you take those 3 triggers and scrunch them down into 1, you greatly speed things up, and that's really the underlying goal.
Okay, so just to kind of recap for everybody on the line, Arnold mentioned ETL. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. And that usually refers to processes that allow us to transfer information from one system to another using tools like Informatica or other tools. I'm not sure what you guys are using.
DBAMP.
I'm sorry, which one?
It's called DBAMP. It's a SQL Server add-on. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
awesome.
Actually, it's a good tool. It's cheap. It's like $1,600 a year, which is dirt cheap.
Good to know. We'll look at it maybe another time.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'll say is that just by merging triggers from 3 to 1, I wouldn't necessarily expect to see a lot of improvement. But what you can find is maybe some ways to trim some fat, as they say, right? To find things that are repeating across triggers and sometimes clean that up a little bit. So with all of that, you were able to actually merge a couple of them together, right?
Yeah, the two prefill triggers, when I put them together, the associated test classes were passing. But the one when I put the third one in, which here is named contact trigger, the test class for that particular trigger fails. And I don't know why. I don't know what I did wrong.
So let's just jump in and start taking a look at this. Just like last week with you, Arnold, we're going to spend some time today learning how to debug. So I was going to do that. That was supposed to clear up, but it didn't. In any case. So let's first try to take a look at this merged trigger that you created. When I go into here, we can see this, obviously the definition of the trigger that's designed to work after delete, before delete, and after insert. So only 3 events. You check for recursive, which we talked about last time, meaning we only want to run this trigger 1 time per execution context. And then you actually have all of this stuff here that happens, which I assume is stuff that you copied from the other triggers.
That's right.
Okay. And what I see here is that you have this select statement here, which looks like you copied from this trigger. You have another select statement that you copied from this trigger. And then there's some other stuff happening here. So what I started to do before all of this is I started to look at actually the original triggers that you had. So I opened the original triggers right here. So this prefill trigger, we can see these 2 triggers, they look very, very much alike. And immediately, even without knowing this fast prefill tool, fast forms prefill, I can tell right away that this was a trigger, and it says here, generated and deployed by fast prefill, meaning this trigger was automatically created. And when you evaluate these 2, it basically tells me that you have 2 forms are related to the contact trigger, so to the contact object, and fast forms just creates a trigger on the object per form, regardless of if it already has a trigger on that object or not. But you can see that really, if you just kind of go fast between them, you can see exactly where the difference is, right? So we can see that one difference is this field that's being queried. And the other one is something here, which is some kind of an update, calling an update method that references that different field that is queried. Beyond that, everything looks pretty much the same. And you can argue that you can actually cut this.
Ohad, your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Okay, good. I was worried that it was me.
And now, Ohad, your audio is completely gone. While Ohad works out some of the audio issues, I thought I'd fill the void here with some thoughts I've had.
Can you hear now?
He's back.
Sorry, I am traveling this week, so I'm doing this from a hotel, and obviously the internet here is magnificent.
You're not in Boston, are you?
No, I'm in Virginia today.
Definitely can't buy you a beer in Virginia.
So what was the last thing you heard me say? And I heard you talking, Luke, before I joined that.
Oh, I was just going to fill the void with some thoughts on trigger handlers and standalone triggers, but now that you're back, I will table that for the next empty void if we need one.
Awesome. So what was the last thing that you did hear me say?
You were comparing the two triggers and noting that they basically do the same thing with slightly different field variations.
Right. So the bottom line is that these two select statements can probably be combined into one select statement. And one of the reasons that Salesforce puts such a restrictive governor limit on SQL queries, meaning you can only do 150 SQL queries, is that SQL queries are really expensive, right? I mean, you actually have to go to the hard drive and you have to get information versus doing stuff in memory, where memory is much faster. So if you're trying to reduce your performance time and your CPU time, one of the first things that you should be asking yourself is, are there any SQL statements that I can trim? Can I combine some SQL statements, get more data in one call from the database, and then just do the separation in memory, instead of having to go to the database twice to query pretty much the same information? Because again, when you think about it, you're querying exactly the same contact, right? You're querying from contact where the ID is in the same list. You're just getting a different field in each one of those.
Right. So it's just adding a comma and putting both attributes in the same query list. But then I wasn't sure how to handle that in the rest of the code. But yeah, I get it. Okay.
The other thing is, and I think that's what Luke was starting to talk about when I got dropped off, is, obviously because you merged these existing triggers, you just copied them into one single trigger. But the other thing that is best practice is to not really have any of the code on the trigger itself. And instead, what you would want to do is have your code on what we call trigger handlers. So the end result should be a really, really small trigger where all of the code that it calls is actually in additional classes that perform the actual work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when I look at all of this stuff here, this looks to me like part of this third trigger. I think that the only part, if I look at these two triggers, I'm trying to find where they are in this big trigger that you created. And I see that you have this, I think it is after an insert, and this is where you have the first loop. This is basically your first trigger, right? Actually, this is both of them at the same time.
Right.
So.
Right, so I put both method calls into the same for loop.
Yep. Okay, so I'm just trying to see what is happening here. So contact in new inserted server URLs. So why don't we try to do this? Why don't we actually go ahead and try to just do this from scratch? I'm going to create a brand new trigger.
Sure.
And we'll call this contact merged trigger. That's not good. Come on. Let's try and refresh this window. Developer console can sometimes be fun.
Well, it's on the same bandwidth that your audio is on, probably.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. So I'm actually going to try and do something else. I'm going to try and use my mobile for internet instead of the hill. And hopefully that will be better. So I may disappear for a moment as I'm switching the connection.
Gotcha.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you. That's awesome. Now, if I can just make this page load again. Okay. Phone is better than hotel internet. That's awesome. Contact merged trigger. I can select, there we go. Contact. And let's just make sure that we have the same events identified here. And now let's just start to look at these two triggers that we want to copy. So we can see that these triggers are only operating after insert. And there's an if statement here that says if trigger is after and trigger is insert, which is an odd thing to put on this trigger because this trigger will only ever execute after insert.
Yeah, it's kind of redundant, isn't it?
Yeah, but it doesn't do much. It doesn't hurt us much. But within the context of this merged trigger, we actually do want to have this condition, right? Because there's
multiple context addresses. Yep.
So let's do this. Let's copy this. Let's copy this entire thing for a moment. Now, one of the things that I hate is when a trigger looks like this in terms of formatting, right? You can see this if is indented as it should be and the list is not. So a quick trick in Developer Console, Control A.
Luke taught me how to do that. Luke taught me how to do that in the last series.
Shift tab.
Control A, Shift tab.
Auto indent. I love that feature. Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Control A.
Well, and Ohad taught me how to do it.
Nice.
Control A to select everything, and then Shift Tab in Developer Console does the auto indent. If you're on a Mac, look, what is it on Mac?
I'm on Mac.
It is the same exact Command A and Shift Tab.
Shift Tab, okay.
It's also useful for doing a little debugging because if you just can't find that missing curly brace or whatnot, if you highlight it all and do it, you'll the indents will not come out correctly, and you'll be able to sort of narrow down where something might be missing.
Cool.
Absolutely, thank you, Luke. Okay, so let's see what this trigger does. This trigger creates a list of contacts called newly inserted items, and it selects the ID and the new client survey from this contact where it's in the trigger ID. Now, this is interesting and odd to me because this is after insert, right? This means this is a brand new contact. And with a brand new contact, if I'm trying to query them from the database with this new client survey, this new client survey should be a part of the trigger.new already. Right? If it was after update and you're not updating this specific field, then your trigger.new may not have the field that you want to work with. But because this is insert, we know that if this field is to have any value, it must be one of the fields that passed to the database in the insert statement.
So in trigger.new, all the fields are available if it's an insert?
If it's an insert, any field that has a value will be available.
Okay.
So because this is after insert, I don't even think we need this so-called statement. Look, do you see any flaw in my logic here?
I do not.
So
Okay.
that list should already exist, and it's just the list of trigger.new.
That's exactly it. So I'm going to comment out this line for a moment. Now we have this list IDs, and it iterates through this list of contacts and adds the list of IDs, basically gets the IDs from that list, which is fine. So what we can do is, instead of newly inserted, let's copy this line out. I'll comment it again. And instead of instead of newly inserted items, what am I going to put here?
Trigger.new.
Perfect. And finally, we call this thing for contact, which I guess they're expecting you to pass the name of the object and the name of the field. And I guess this is some kind of a survey ID.
A random hard-coded ID, just what you love to see.
Yeah. But
yeah, it's a
it looks like it looks like the only thing they really care about. They want to know the name of the object, the name of the field, the ID of the survey, I guess. And the only thing they really care about you passing is the list of IDs. Right? So in other words, all they want is the list of IDs from the trigger.new. If you think about it, you're not even passing them this field, the value from this field.
Well, except the only issue is FastForms utilities, visual antidote method, and those classes are, you can't look at them. They're not in the clear. I would have loved to.
Right. This one is managed, so you can't see what it does. Now, what's interesting is that it does say that after all of this, it's trying to update that list. So it makes me think, okay, maybe this class, this method, is actually acting on newly inserted items. Because it's after insert. Yeah, it's because it's yeah, because it's after insert, then it has to update, to call an update statement specifically. And I think that's why it does that. So that explains why we need this and why we would need this. I would still avoid even the SOQL query. Instead, I would just say list of new, just assign it as a new list contact. And here I can, as I iterate through them, I can also add so all I've done is essentially now I have this field, I basically recreated the same list by adding it from the trigger.new. But the difference is that I was able to avoid the select statement, which is costly in terms of time and CPU.
Cool.
So with that, I'm going to bring this back. I'm going to take that off. And then the other question that you can ask yourself is, for the other trigger, why do you need this stuff again, right? You can actually operate on the same newly inserted items. So what I would do is I would only call this method. This line I would copy. And I would put that here. Because what I'm guessing this method is doing, it's looking for a list called newly inserted item. And it does something to that list. And after that, we call an update to that list. So all we need to do is call this method, assuming that this method doesn't actually do any kind of inserts or updates. It might do other inserts as a result, but you're still working on the same list of contacts from your trigger.
That's the same. I'm looking for the fine print, but it looks like the exact same.
Yeah, I copied the wrong one. I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was just saying the same thing. Okay. So the only thing is that you're referencing a different field. Now,
Right.
again, because this field, because this is an insert, and we can assume that, you know, the field is either available in the trigger if it has a value, or it's null if it doesn't have a value, we can expect that this method probably puts some value here or uses the value here. We don't need to do anything. So I'm going to save this trigger. And let's deactivate the trigger that you created, just so we can test this.
Right. And then run the test class. It's great, because removing the query would remove 10,000 or more queries from the batch.
Yep, if you're doing a batch with 10,000 records, you're talking about.
Yeah, no, we were trying to push like 3 million records in a mass update, and it wasn't pretty.
Okay, so we've deactivated this trigger. And let's try and run this test. So we can try to run the test first. And if I did everything correctly, then this test should pass, and it does.
Hooray.
And let's run this test.
And so the other one will pass too.
I sure hope so. And it did.
Okay, so I got
we
this
actually,
far. I didn't do it as well as you did, but I got this far.
No, I understand. I know that. But my point is to you, one of your biggest complaints was about the CPU timeouts, right?
No, this addresses that. It's lovely. It's elegant.
And naturally, just taking the code from 3 triggers and moving them to 1 trigger, I would not expect to reduce CPU time significantly, if any, at all. So that's why it was important for me to talk about those Sockwell queries and see if we can eliminate them.
But wouldn't each trigger firing require validation and workflow to reevaluate in between the fires? Like,
when you're talking about a batch?
Well, I mean, if you have 3 triggers in the execution context, each one will cause workflow to evaluate and cause. No?
No. In fact, what will happen, all the before triggers will run, and then it will run validations and workflows.
Okay, so
it doesn't run each one of them. Yeah, it doesn't run each one of them independently, and then does, you know, workflows, validation rules, and then goes to the next before trigger. It will run all the before triggers in any order, right? They don't guarantee the order, but it first will run all of the before, and then it will go to the next step, which is validation.
So if there's an after trigger and a DML call, that's what will cause reevaluation of everything, eh?
So the after trigger might cause the before trigger to run again, right? Because we have an update statement at the end here on these contacts, it will actually cause a recursion of your trigger execution. So we should implement your recursive check right here. So let's copy that. And notice what I've done here is I like my brackets to be in a separate line, and
me too.
I just do it this way, and then Control Shift and Tab, Control A and Tab, and everything is well indented now. And of course, I like to add a lot of comments. So recursive check to make sure that a trigger does not execute twice in the same execution context. Okay? You can add as many comments as you want at this point. Okay, let's look at your second one, the one that you actually had a problem with, and that was contact trigger, right? And this trigger is a little bit longer, and you can see that there's separate logic for delete and separate logic for is undelete. And this is an area where I would definitely recommend to put this logic inside of a helper class. Okay, so just give me 1 second. Apologies. Okay, so let's create a helper class. And we can call this contact trigger helper. And let's see what we need to do here. Contact trigger. Come on. So I'm going to copy some of this stuff here. Let's start by copying this. And then we'll see what we need to do for it. So there's a list of IDs. I'm actually going to have here.
Create a method, right?
Exactly. Oh, give me a second, I apologize.
So the package name is Action Plans. So that helps.
Yeah, just give me a second. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at something else. Okay, sorry about that. Public void, and let's say process delete. And we expect it to give us, so you can see that it's referencing trigger.old here, right? And what else is it referencing here? Is it a trigger.new? Anywhere else here? I don't see anything else here, just trigger.old. And that makes sense because it's after delete, right?
Trigger new.
So I can remove this.
At the bottom, there's a bit at the bottom of it that references trigger.new, but perhaps that's to be another method.
That will be in the second method, exactly. So here's process delete, and we're going to tell it that you have to pass here a list of contact. We called it trigger old. And so here we can just change this from trigger.old to trigger old. And we can remove this if trigger is delete, because we already know that we'll only call this if this is a delete.
Right, you'll handle that in the trigger. Yep.
Exactly. And so we can delete one of these closed brackets. Okay, where do you see problems? Line 33. We haven't gotten to you yet. So we can remove this if undelete is, and we'll replace this with public void process undelete. And we expect to get trigger.new here as well. So we'll pass a list of contact, trigger new. And let's see if there's anything else here that is needed. Trigger.old. No. So we just need to change trigger.new to trigger new. And here also, trigger new. Okay. This part needs to be just trigger dot is test, right? Is it trigger dot is test? Nicholas, what do I call that? Trigger dot is
Is test is running test? Yeah.
Trigger is running test. Yep. Thank you. Test dot is running test is what we want to check. Test dot is running test.
Yeah, I don't know. That was strange to me too. They create a variable somewhere at the top, Boolean, that they were referencing with that, but it all seemed kind of strange. Of course, not there. They don't.
Yeah. So let's see.
It might have been in the test class that I was seeing it, but it's definitely, yeah, no, it was in the test class. They do something like that where they create a Boolean instead of using the method, which seemed also weird.
Oh, of course. Is running test, of course, needs to be its method. There you go. Now we have two methods in this helper class, right? And let's go back to our trigger. And so we have here this if statement, right? For the if it's after an insert. And now we can say after that, if trigger dot is after and trigger dot is on delete, and we have another if statement, trigger dot is before and trigger dot is delete. I don't really need this before because if it's delete, it will only be before delete. That's the only event we have here. The same with the undelete. But if somebody ever changes this trigger, we know that we captured the right logic for this.
Right.
This is not a bad practice to actually write these, to specify the exact event that you want. So now here we can write, actually, sorry, let me just put curly brackets here. There we go. Now we can just put contact trigger helper dot process undelete. You see this? And it's asking me to pass a list of trigger.new, of triggered new. So I can just say literally just trigger.new. And exactly the same here, contact trigger helper dot process delete. And here it's going to be trigger.old. Helps if I put a semicolon at the end of the line. Okay. Oh, we need to make this a static method. Or does the class have to be static or the method? Yeah, the method, sorry.
Great question.
We'll talk in a second about why.
Thank you.
I'm saving this. Didn't save. They do. I think because I changed it to static. This is horrible. I hate this kind of, I understand what they tried to do here. It's just very confusing to me. So what we see here, I think because it's static, it can't see this thing here.
So you have to create the lists within each method?
Maybe not. I think maybe we just need to say public before it, right?
Oh, that would save me a lot of coding.
Let's see.
I have
I don't know if you can define it as new.
I have a trigger handler with a bunch of methods, and the lists are recreated in every freaking method for that reason.
That's interesting. Luke, do you have anything to say about this?
I don't, but I have to confess I was tuning out for the last couple of minutes there.
Okay, 1 second.
I'm checking Untapped to figure out why that is, Luke.
Sadly, it's not for drinking beer. It's for trying to get a continuous integration set up.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Give me a second and we'll figure this out. Yeah, I think that's what we need to do. This needs to be public, not defined as a new list.
I gotta say, it's sort of ambitious to dive in and solve this kind of stuff in a 45-minute window. You want to make sure.
I agree.
You want to make well, you want to make sure your clients don't know you're able to do things this quickly, or they'll wonder about your billing hours.
My clients know that I can do stuff that quickly. That's part of the reason why they come to me.
Uh-huh. Don't sell yourself short. That's all.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell my boss I spent a week on this tomorrow. No, I'm kidding. He actually knows. I talked to my boss. I said, I'm going to get help. I'm going to tap out and beg for help. No, this is great.
So why am I getting variable does not exist? Does this maybe help? Okay. I'm absolutely doing something pretty stupid. Can't think of what it is right now. Okay, so this saves. So the problem, the reason that it has to be static is because I did not instantiate this helper, right? So what I can do instead is say something like contact trigger helper equals new contact trigger helper.
You misspelled the first contact.
Yep, thank you. Then we can say helper dot, that should work. Yep. So if I was able to make it static, if I wasn't an idiot at this point, then we should be able to, we don't have to instantiate it, right? But that's fine, we instantiate and we just call it a process and we're passing, and theoretically that should work. So now what we can try and do is we can try and run this test. Now I don't expect it to pass because I think the same reason that it failed for you before will cause it to still fail now.
Did you save it?
I did, yes, thank you.
We can't see your top bar, so.
Oh, you can't see my top bar?
Not the very top. but it's okay. You can't see the menu.
Okay, so let's see what happened with this test. It did fail. So now we can see in this test, there's a bunch of tests and only one of them failed.
The contact
now,
one.
The contact one. Now, when I tried to look at it earlier, it was a little difficult because of all of these tests, the log was too long. So let's just run this specific contact test, the one that's failing. So I'm going to say new run, and we're going to select this test class, and just select the contact to run just this method.
Nice.
I still expect it to fail, but at least I'll be able to look at the debug log and see what's happening. Now, let's ask you this. If our trigger that we just created was off and contact trigger was on, it would pass?
Yes, and for no clear reason.
Okay, let's try this. And I know we're at the end of your time, so I'll try to do this quickly and then we'll jump off to Hima's stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to take anybody else's time.
No problem. They can. You can continue. It's a big issue at least.
No, we should be able to get to yours as well, even if we run a little bit late. I should be okay.
Mine
with
is very little. It's just I'm just beginning. So.
Okay. So here's this contact trigger is now active. I deactivated our trigger. So if we go back to this contact, you see that really it has only 3 active. One is this contact trigger. One is this whatever SL contact trigger is, and this packaged one.
The SL stands for Silverline, actually.
Okay. And so if we try to run this test that failed, I'm just going to say test rerun. Now passes. But what is interesting is to ask ourselves, is this because these two are also off? Triggers interrupting that other one.
Well, turn them all on and
well,
give it a go. Sure.
If that still doesn't work, I have one more idea.
I'm glad, because I have none.
And that's without even, we have not even tried to debug yet, right? And if you look at your debug log, the reason it's actually failed is because of an assert statement.
Right, exactly. I looked. I sure did look.
So it still passes. So I'm going to go back now and just bring us back to where we were. Now let's start to debug. So deactivate this guy. Deactivate this guy. Come on. I hate this mouse. The joys of working from a hotel room.
You're doing great.
Okay, I'll close these guys now that they're inactive. I can leave this guy back on. I'm going to try and do one quick thing on our merge trigger before we start to debug. I'm going to remove this recursive check. Let's run this test one more time.
It was failing before I added the recursive check.
Okay, so that's good news in the sense that we know that it's not that.
Yeah.
Again, just one more time now to see that, make sure that we have the latest and most correct debug statement. And we see this, actually here, this was different with the recursive. the error was different. And says you cannot undelete an action plan whose related object is deleted. So that's interesting. Now, one of the things that I suspect might be causing a problem in this interaction is this update statement. Because what happens is on an update, launching into a new, still in the same context, but we're starting the trigger from scratch. So this might be, but it's only after insert. Okay, so let's look at the bug. And let me just close some stuff here. We have labs. Okay. Actually, didn't mean to close those classes, but I did. So when we look at this state, let's go to the bottom. Let's see where our failure is. It says, where is the assertion? So if you guys remember, I said last week, the filter is case sensitive. I wrote without, couldn't find anything. So that's always important to remember. Okay, in line 161, this failed. So if we go into this test class, here's line 161, and here's the assert state fails. And here, let's see what it says. We verify that the action plans are undeleted when restoring related objects. Verify that the action plans are undeleted when restoring related object. But this is not an delete. So there's a test counter trigger. There's a utility that creates new action plan. This is a new action plan utility. This is a helper class, just like we created. It does create the action plan, and then method in this controller, this utility class, creates a new action plan for contacts, and I assume it's doing one contact. I assume, or one action plan. Can we open, is this going to be packaged or not? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's a little slow, so let's give it a
Yeah,
second.
you're breaking up a little bit, but it's not as bad as it was before.
So here is that we see that they call a method called create new action plan. Let's look for it. It has a parameter that says what is the related object, which was context, and then an integer that says how many tasks you want to create. Then it does a bunch of things. It's a plan at the end of it. And that's all that it is. Action plan and returning it, and it's some other stuff. Again, without really diving into what it is, it's a little safe. So it's creating a new action plan, and that gets returned into this AP action plan. It selects a new contact, and it says, get the contact where the ID is the contact associated with it. So which contact associated with this AP is a good question. Let's say anything about contact. This contact, this new contact. So let's look at a method called create new contact. And here there's a new contact. And it has some random words for the last name, and it inserts. So in other words, as part of this, it actually inserts a bunch of other things.
Right.
As well.
Right, because it works for all objects, right? Like the test methods are for all objects, so it's got the ability to create a bunch of different types of objects.
So think about it this way. What happened is this, right? As part of this action plan, when we call this method, the contact was inserted, right? Which means already the after insert trigger ran. Let's put something else. Where's my trigger merged?
I actually put in that debug statement as I was looking at it myself to try and figure out, is it creating the contact or not? So I put in a debug down there.
And let's say here another system.debug. This is not a recursion, right? Then we can say another system debug here after insert.
Context fires, yeah.
And then here's another system debug after undelete. Here's another system debug before delete. Let's run the same test again. I just want to run this one method. I still, of course, expect to fail. Let's open this again. Let's see what the statements we get. So here, contact trigger is firing, right? This is the first time. And then we can see this is not a recursion. And this is the after insert. Let's do one more thing. We can add here another column called method. And here's dot contact trigger merged. This is obviously where it's doing this. There's an SL contact trigger that ran before ours, the silver line contact trigger. And it runs after. And then contact trigger started again here. This is part of the undelete. But the problem is, because you already ran it for the insert, you're not letting it run again. So the recursion in this case is actually an expected behavior. And you don't want to block the recursion.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a method. I think there's also a method somewhere in this org that says instead of check recursive, it's I think I have an is before and an is after recursion check somewhere in the org that I haven't used in a while for that.
You can definitely implement those as well if you want.
Yeah.
You can also do before insert. You can create whatever recursion checks you want, right? I mean, it's really all that it is. It's a static boolean that you're setting, and the static boolean lives throughout the entire execution context. So you can decide whenever you want to set it.
Right. You can get the before contact to run once and the after context to run once. Exactly.
So we already know that because of the recursion, we never really got to the bottom of the error. And that is why the assertion definitely would have been incorrect, because the trigger didn't actually run on the delete.
Right.
So in other words,
which is when
the delete method ran, I would expect this helper class to be called, but because of the recursion, it did not call it.
So if you comment it out and run it again, you'll get to the underlying, the next level of error, right?
Exactly. And I think, did I run it already? No, I didn't. Let me run it one more time.
Did you comment out and save already?
I did.
Great. You're fast. And there's a little lag
on
the screen. There's a little lag on the screen too, so it's a bit hard to see sometimes.
Okay, so we ran it. It failed again. And now we should see that's a different message. The undelete is failed. So let's try and figure out why that happened. Let's go and open our log. And we can, search for that message, or we can just assume that it's somewhere toward the end, and here it is. And we can see that it's called from line 176. And you can see, by the way, that it executed this contact merge. It's called after undelete, right? But then we're seeing undelete failed. You cannot delete an action plan whose related object is deleted. So interesting. Let's see what happens right before that.
Somewhere in there, too, there was an attempt to dereference a null object when I was looking at it.
Yeah, it also said here a required field is missing. Line 41. But it's line 41. It says on the contact merge trigger, but I don't think that's line 41 on this, because do we even have line 41? We don't. So it must be on the test class, line 41. Maybe? Yeah, so it's part of this, I think, when it's trying to create, but we didn't even run this test method, so never mind. It's line 41 somewhere else. Okay, let's continue this up a little bit. Here's the contact insert. Okay, let's just do debug for a moment. So this is the insert of the contact. This is not a recursion. After insert, it does all its stuff. Then it's back to the test method. And here's a system debug that CID is. And I think that was right here, 160.
No, that's good.
Where was it?
I don't know, but I wrote that debug statement because I wasn't sure if it was actually creating the contact or not.
Oh, CID is here. This is line 154. Yep, 154. And then we can see the next debug statement is again going into the contact trigger. So here is state 158. So if I remove this, I should see about it executing 158, and here's the statement, right? And so after that, it's going to debug, and to the delete trigger. Of course, it's saying it's recursion check, but we can see into the before delete. And now we have this SO trigger firing. I don't know what that's. But now it's already after undelete. So it looks like it went successfully. So assume this completely, this version went correctly. Try to just search for line 161 without debug. Why is it not showing up? This is line 160. Line 160, just a select statement. Select 0 rows. So it's 0. And then it gets into this undelete. So this, I guess, is not really showing, but that's fine. So the next thing we see is this undelete. And it's looking to catch this exception and add an assert saying, hey, is the error message you cannot delete an action plan whose related object is deleted? So this is actually an expected value. It's expecting to catch this, and it's expecting to get this error message.
Right.
So if it's caught, then why are we still getting an error? Another undeleters. So now they're restoring this, now they're trying to undelete again. And now they're expecting to actually have this one again. What happens after this? So this is undelete.
What's infuriating is that this all passes until you
So
rewrite
there's some
until you rewrite it, and then
there's some interaction between those, because what they're trying to do here is the ending CID. I'm not sure what it's trying to do here.
But you know, it all passes, and then you
I
rewrite
think
it.
this is the section of code that is failed.
Well,
So
I mean,
you know, sometimes that's what happens when you get unexpected interaction in the code.
right. And of course,
And
the
that's
dirty.
possible. I mean, if we continue this for another 30 minutes, we can find out where it is.
Yeah, and of course, the dirty trick would be to comment out the assertion and move on.
Well, but we don't want to comment out the assertion. We may want to comment out the assertion as a just confirmation. Hey, is this where it's failing? But it's actually not this assertion. I think it passes this assertion. So we can put another system debug. Passed undelete assertion successfully. I think when it fails, it's actually on this undelete for some reason. So if we again just run our test.
And I mean, honestly, it's. I guess it's one of the things that's discouraging about evaluating a path towards being a developer is this amount of work over an undelete, which will likely never, ever, ever happen. Like nobody's undeleting these objects.
Well,
I mean,
think about it as a developer, especially when you work with a managed package, right? You don't ever know how your users are going to use that. And I don't know if you've ever heard that quote, right? But quote that really, and it goes like this. It says, programming today, a race between software engineers striving to build bigger and better idiot-proof programs, and the universe trying to produce bigger and better idiots. How the universe is winning.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
As a developer, you always want to think about how my users are going to break my code. What else could the user try and do? And if you want to prevent them from doing this, you have to explicitly prevent them from doing this. Right? And this is exactly that scenario. Now, especially when you write a managed package, that's doubly true because you know you're going to have 100 customers. Each customer has 100 different use cases.
Right.
So you really do have to account for all of these things. So let's look for the debug statement. Hopefully we'll find the debug statement I just added. Here's the statement. So we know it casted assertion, and then it goes again into the contact trigger.
But when you put that assert in, was it below the brackets? Past.
Right. I didn't put an assert. I put a system debug. Where did I just put that? What did I just do? Oh, this is I went down. Sorry. Here, passed undelete. So after this assertion completed, I put this just debug statement to say it completed it.
But wouldn't it go above the higher curly bracket in the loop in the cat?
It doesn't matter. The fact that it got to this line means that that we passed this try catch statement.
Oh, so if it
didn't
failed,
fail yet.
If it failed, you would never get to that line of code.
Exactly.
I see. Thank you. Learning. Thank you.
That's okay. That's why we're here. And then the next thing we can see in debug, we can see the next thing is it going back into the contact trigger specifically for an undelete. And you see this is like the last debug here. You have something else, but that's it. So the undelete statement is where things go awry. Now I'm trying to understand why this undelete the expected to fail. Oh, this is where I changed that is test and I should not have. Because it's not about is test running. It's actually a method that they set for themselves.
Yeah, it's at the top of the test class. There's this weird is test thing that I didn't understand myself.
Yep. So I should not have changed that. Do I still have that original one? Yes. Here we go. Let's just copy that. Find what it was. This is not. I just assumed that they're trying to see if it's a test. And that was correct. Where is this?
There's this weird is test method that they put inside the class, which threw me sideways.
Okay, we're going to, where am I? Oh, sorry, helper class. So we're just going to do this last time, and let's see what happens now, because we do have to go over to start Hima.
Yes.
Look at that. The test has passed. Are you there?
Great. Awesome.
Awesome.
Arnold, are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm here now. I was muted. It passed.
The test has now passed.
Why? Like what? How?
So the reason that the test didn't pass, so when you ran the test, the reason it didn't pass was because of the recursive test.
Uh-huh.
When I removed the recursive, it didn't pass because I changed that is test.
Oh, earlier in the session.
Yep.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, this is amazing.
So we solved it, but hopefully you understand where this went wrong, right? The recursive test is a great tool, unless your trigger needs to be able to handle multiple executions of the trigger in the same context, which this does.
Yeah, this one does. All right.
Many triggers do, by the way. I mean, using recursion blocking, like you do recursion check, I wouldn't just put it on every trigger that I ever create. Only on ones that I suspect recursion could cause an issue.
Okay. That's a big lesson. Because, you know, recursion is like the big bad awful that everybody wants to...
Well, think about it this way, right? Let's say that you have a trigger, and we'll finish with this and then we'll move on to Hima. But let's think that you have a trigger, and the trigger is after update, okay? And it's testing to see if some value exists. And if the value is there, if status is, sold, then set something, a creator task, okay?
Yep.
So as you update this record, the status may not be sold, but maybe a workflow is now updating the status to sold. And as a result of that update, your trigger is going to run again. And this time it is sold.
Uh-huh.
So the fact that your trigger should run more than once is, by default, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
When is it bad? It's bad in a scenario that you expect that you do very, very specific things that are maybe not directly related to a specific value, or you're seeing your code executing multiple times and there's some interaction with managed packages, and
Right.
I'm not going to get into like a lot of why recursion is great or what are the use cases, but I would caution to not just put it there every time you write a trigger.
Well, this is the lesson of the night.
I'm glad.
For me.
And
All
with
right.
that,
We'll move
so
on.
I think we solved the problem. It took us some time today, but we were able to do that. And I want to finish with that. Arnold, do you have any questions?
No,
Okay.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome.
Are you ever in Boston?
Every now and then.
All right, I'll send you my contact info.
No problem.
I'll
Oh, no problem. And if you need any more help, we'll be happy to have you as a patient again or as an observer in the next ones as well.
I tried to promote it. I created an
I
article.
saw it and I appreciate it. I reshared some of the stuff you did.
Yeah, we want to get a lot of people into this besides me, so I'm doing what I can to scream it.
I'm okay with the reception that it had so far, especially since we're still figuring out the timing, the format, and all that. So, I don't want the entire world to be here quite yet. I'm happy with having like 10, 5, 10 people here.
Okay.
Well, okay.
I'm going to mute up and enjoy the next section.
Awesome. Hima, it's your turn.
Yeah,
Hi, Hima.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. I hope that you are okay with staying a bit later. I'm okay with staying on for another, half an hour or so, and hopefully we can get some stuff done. So you were not able to give me access to your environment. So let's pass you the presenter role. Or in fact, you can probably just click share. Can you just click share screen, or do I need to make you a presenter?
I think I don't have those options. Where do I have to go? Click options.
Let's try to do this. Okay, it's going to ask you to download it. Yeah, you have to download it.
Okay.
In the meantime, why don't you, if you're able to talk while you're downloading and setting this up, why don't you try and give us a little bit of background on what you're trying to do?
Okay, this is Hima Bindu. I'm a sales admin at Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, but I'm just beginning to code, and I'm trying to play around with that. And I have few use cases in my org where I was trying to implement certain things like a user interface kind of thing for particular programs. So when I tried to use Visualforce page to show up for a particular record type, I'm getting this error. So I was just wondering what I'm doing wrong.
Okay. So let's see, as soon as you are able to share your screen, we'll jump into it. Actually, until you do this, I'll share my screen again. Oh, I don't even think I can. Is it already downloaded the app for you?
I think it's still joining me. Okay.
While we have a minute, I have an interesting story to share about the theory of one trigger per object, and trigger handlers, and I went all in on that model a couple of years ago, and we started moving everything into it, and that worked great until we had to start moving stuff out of it. Like we would want to get rid of a trigger. And we realized that to do that, we actually had to first recreate a standalone trigger so that we could then push that in, remove it from the trigger handler, and then and only then could we actually safely delete the trigger we were retiring. So I realized there's some long-term maintenance headaches around the one trigger to rule them all and trigger handler things.
Can you add a little bit more color on that? Why did you have to separate it to a standalone trigger?
So because we needed to be able to modify like the trigger handler that called the class that we were activating. But we would have failed the unit tests if we just took out the code that it called. So until we could make that update safely and have the unit test pass, we couldn't remove any of the code we wanted to get rid of. So it just added a couple of steps and some pretty lightweight editing to removing the handled triggers.
Okay, that's interesting.
Could you not Could you not?
Yeah, we
just,
can see
comment it
we can
out?
see your screen now. We can see your screen, Hima. Yeah, that's an interesting point, Luke. I mean, I think the challenge is obviously, of course, every time you want to deactivate or remove anything from production, it's actually much more of a pain than I think it should be. Because you can just deactivate your code before you can deactivate it, the test still needs to pass, which is kind of dumb.
Right, right.
You can close that tab, Hima, in your other Chrome screen. Look, so just to finish your point, so what did you guys end up doing?
We ended up backing away from the trigger factory model that we were using and went back to standalone triggers for each different function. We left the trigger factory in place so that if we really had to ensure order of execution of two different triggers, we could put it back in. But at this point, we have most of our objects have multiple triggers on them, and we haven't actually had any issues with the order in which they run.
Well, the one thing to note is that even though Salesforce says that they never guarantee the order of execution, I've never seen the order of execution change. So, it normally runs in the same order, but they just say, hey, don't count on it. And that's where the one trigger per is valuable, right? I would be interested if one day you want to show us what was the issue, and I'd be interested because I've been working with this for a while, and I'm working with a big customer now who's implementing this. They're actually taking it a bunch of steps further. They're integrating a whole trigger framework for separation of concerns. But I would love to see what were the challenges that you hit.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do it. It would take 10 minutes to show the hazard.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into Hima because we're already holding you over. So tell us what you're doing, Hima. What are we supposed to look at? Hima? If you're talking, we can't hear you. Are you on mute? Guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
I can hear you.
Can you hear Hima?
No,
Nope.
we cannot.
Hima, it seems like you are always having troubles with my with my sessions. Last week you couldn't join. I'm not sure why you are muted. It seems like on Join Me you are not muted, but I don't know if you're using a phone or a microphone. On the GoToMeeting, on the Join Me on the top bar where you have the buttons, the left one is microphone, and if you hover over it, there's an arrow down, and you can see if you're on computer or phone audio. So you can try to turn that off and on, or check your audio settings to see if it's connected to the right microphone. If you're using computer audio and you can't figure it out, we cannot hear you. Oh, we can now.
Yes.
Hi, that's nice.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
So tell us what are you doing here? What is this Visualforce? What is this class? I'm sorry.
Okay, this is a class, right? Okay, give me a second. I'll just show you what I'm working on. Okay. Okay, this is the page I have created, which I want to show it on our regular new page. When I go to the programs, we get this new option.
Okay.
And we have number of record types, but I just want to give specific record type this Visualforce page. If I select PhD, so if I continue, it has to open that page. Is it possible or not? I'm just so I tried to create that Visualforce page by creating a class and extended this into this. But when I run the try to preview, it's going into runtime. I mean, non-stop flickering. You can see here. Can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you close this?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so your Visualforce page has a standard controller for the object programs and has an extension of PCMH extension with an action of URL redirect. That means that as soon as the page is loading, you're trying to redirect to the URL, to call that URL redirect, right?
Right.
So now go back to your class, to your controller, PCMH prog extension.
Okay.
And let's look at URL redirect here. So you're saying here's the selected record type, and you get the current page.getParameter.get record type. And then you're saying, well, the problem is when you do a preview,
okay,
the page loads without any record type.
Oh, I
because
see.
you don't actually have a record. So that's why your URL redirect keeps you in a loop. So let's see what you're doing. You get the record type, and then you're saying get record type infos by name, and you get the PCMH record type and get record type ID. And now you want to say if the record type of the page equals to this record type,
right?
Then if string value of da equals to that, then you set the page reference to the current page to Apex Page's current page. And you put no override. And you set redirect. Yeah, so you're basically always just redirecting to the current page.
Right.
But the problem is when you do a preview, you don't actually have any record type on the page. You're just loading the page without any record type.
So, so if I put this page on new button, so if I
so the other problem is if you want to override the new button, then you not only override, you have to override the record type selection as well. You have to create that part as well. You know, when you click new, it asks you to select the record type.
Right. Yeah, that's a different page, right? Record type selection option.
Yeah, but the record type selection option is part of the new button. So if you override the new button to your page, then it's skipping that record selection altogether.
Okay.
So it's up to you. So it's up to you to basically show to the user when they click new, you have to show them all the record types and ask them the record type they want to create.
So for that, I have to create another Visualforce page for the select options.
I'm sorry?
Do I have to create another Visualforce page for the select options for the record type?
Yeah, for the select record type, exactly.
Okay.
It's not it's like the same page. It wouldn't just be more code in the same page.
Well, what I would do is I would do something different.
Okay.
Right? Then you don't really care to compare the page record type, right? So think about it this way. The first thing, just give me 1 second. Sorry. So what you want to do is you want to ask the user.
Hello?
Sorry, I apologize. My father was calling me. So the first thing, when somebody clicks the new button, you want to ask them what record type of record you want to create, right?
Right.
So you show you need to show all of these options.
Right.
And when they click new, they click create, then you have to redirect them to another page. And what you can do is redirect them to your page or redirect them to the record page with the no override. But the problem with this is that using the no override is not what you want in this case.
Okay.
Because what will happen if you, let me show you something. Let me ask for permission to control your keyboard.
I have a question here. I've always assumed that the reason you have to select the record type first when creating a new record is that it's going to direct you to the correct page layout, the correct edit page layout based on the record type's page layout assignment.
That's correct.
So if you were going to your own create new page, you're sort of, is it still necessary to go through that step? Because you're ultimately presenting them with a custom create page anyway and not referencing the original page layouts.
Right. So I have a little bit more information that Hima shared with me that I did not say to the group. But what Hima is trying to do is this object has, as you saw, about 15 or so record types. And for all of the record types, she wants to use the default, page layout. But one record type, she wants to use a Visualforce page. Because she wants if it's the specific record type, that she wants it to look vastly different than what a standard page layout can accomplish.
Got it.
So the challenge is that you will need to create, you will have to handle all of these different scenarios. So in other words, you have to create a page for creating new records.
Okay.
And when you go to that page, you'll have to ask them what record type they want to create.
Right.
And then pass them somewhere else based on that. If you're clicking view, you will also want to override the view. And that's where you want to get the record type from the record and also redirect them based on that. The problem with using an override on the view and on create and using the no override is that you then cannot actually use the page as an edit page. So if you have an override on the edit page, I'm trying to think how to explain that. Hold on. Show me this page.
Which page? The previous
No, the
page?
one you're on. Just go up a little bit.
Okay.
Just scroll up a little bit. Actually, I have mouse control, right? So let me just take a look here.
Okay.
So this page is PCMH page view. And you can actually call that page. So where is this? Where did you have the list view? It's this, programs, right?
Yeah.
So I can get the record ID from here. And the page name is PCMH. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to add Apex and then PCMH page and put an ID of that record ID.
Okay.
So if you had overridden the view, this is what you would get. This is loading your page with that one record. But that page is in an edit mode, I guess. Yeah, so this is basically all input fields. So now, do you intend to have a view for this as well, or just a new? Do you just want to override the new page, or do you want to override view as well? Because if I take this record and I just put it here right now, then it's just going to load the standard page layout, right?
Right, right.
And is this acceptable?
No, I want the new page.
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's no easy way to say just, and I think I told you that in the email where you asked me this the first time. Right? There's no easy way to say, hey, one record type I want to handle in a vastly different way than any other record type of the same object. It actually forces you to recreate everything
for individual record types.
For all of the record types.
Okay.
I think the no override is not going to be a very, let me show you actually. Let me show you. So here we go to the program object.
Can I ask a stupid question?
No stupid questions.
I just want to understand why you need to override the create page. Like, what is it about either the create page or the standard record page that you absolutely have to override in a way that you can't accomplish with the standard page layout editor? Like,
that's a very good question.
The use case. What's the need?
The problem is, like, we have different field labels length issue where we have in standard we have just limit of 40 characters.
Yeah, but I think I told you this. I mean, the requirement that you're getting from your boss, I think it's just not. So give me an example. Which field label do you want to have longer?
The last one, recognition status.
Okay, that's not too long.
No, I just gave random names like that, but it's just want to.
So you see the idea with different record types on a record, and Arnold, thank you. You kind of pointed me to the right direction, right? Because the first question you have to ask, and this is very, very typical, right? I mean, as an admin, as a Salesforce admin working in a company, you get a lot of requests from users in your company, right? Sometimes those users can be your boss even telling you, hey, I needed to do X, Y, and Z, right? And a lot of times those requests don't make sense, or they just don't follow best practices. They're asking you to recreate something that the effort worth to do it is not justified by the value that you get from what they're asking you to do. So in other words, if all you're trying to do in this scenario is change this to something that's much longer, and you want the field label to be different for each record type, it's not something that's supported in Salesforce out of the box. And you would have to go through a significant effort just to be able to do this. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that it's worth asking the question, can we just rename this label? Can we label this field something that applies, that makes sense in the context of all of the record types? Instead of saying, hey, for this record type, we'll call it X, for this record type, we'll call it Y, it doesn't really make sense because the field is capturing the same information. That's the value of this. Another question would be, okay, if it is vastly different information, then why are we using the same field? Why are we not creating two different fields and then putting one on the page layout for record type A and one for record type B?
My problem is, like, my challenge was, like, for this program, we have questions like from the patients or from the providers. So we want to put that question and get the data. So the question can be maybe 2 lines or 3 lines, you know?
Yeah.
So for that purpose, I thought of creating a page where we can increase the field label length and then capture the data in the same program page, program object, you know.
Have you considered flow for something like this?
Yeah, that's a perfect use case for that.
Yeah.
Because essentially what you're saying, hey, there's something that says recognition status, but when you want to ask your user, you don't want them to just say recognition status, you wanted to ask them a whole question. Based on this patient's you know, based on as reviewing this patient's table, considering all of the values in sections 1 through Z, what is the recognition status that applies today? Right, that's the question, but the field is recognition status.
Right.
Right.
And you can build all of that on a single flow screen, and it would be lovely.
Exactly.
Oh,
So when you show the record type in a view status, you're still showing recognition status is this. But when they're entering a new one, you actually use a flow to be able to do all of those things. That's an option. Flow is not always the best solution, but it's definitely a valuable and valid option for what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Another option, actually, no, that wouldn't really apply.
I've been an admin for 5 years, right? If it was me, the field would be rec status. Done. Just like, it's okay to say no.
No, I agree. And that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you, Hima. I mean, as a Salesforce admin, you're not just, you cannot be just a drone, right? You can't just say, here's my requirement, I'm gonna, no matter what, if it makes sense or not, I'm gonna do it. You're expected to say, you know, this is not best practice. This doesn't make sense in this context.
Okay.
Or you can say, listen, you're asking me to do something. Obviously, it would be nice to solve that question, but it's going to take me 2 weeks of work just to put that question on. Is it worth 2 weeks of my time to do that? Right?
Speaking as a really old school admin here, I might add another field with the label that you wanted to have, and then only show that field on the layout for this record type, and then have a workflow rule that just passes that into the recognition status field so that it is there globally across all of the record types.
Right, like
but my concern is like when we are trying to pull the report, we will be having 2 fields, right, with that?
Well, but that's what Luke is saying, right? So you show 2 fields. I mean, one field on the page layout for report type for the record type A and one for record type B, 2 different fields. But you have a process builder that assigns the value from the field number 2 to field number 1. So even though you're showing a different field on the screen, the values are always going to be the same in both of them, regardless of the record type. And that way, when you report, you can still report on one field and show it for all the record types.
Right. So one field is the question, which is a formula text field per Luke's idea.
You can't use a formula text. I was thinking the same, but you can't use a formula text because you can't show it on a new record page.
Right.
But you only report on the answer field. One field is the question and the other is the answer. And the other thing that might help is, you know, like if you named it rec status or something shorter, I see now that there's no help text there. There's no little question mark. And so you could create help text that the help text could enumerate more information.
Yeah, right now we are using that option, like naming them as short and then giving explanation in that help text. But I thought if it's possible with Visualforce page, why not we can do it. So I just playing around with that and, you know.
Yeah, I think your approach is. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying it's great what you wrote. I haven't even tried to do that. So you're to be commended for killing yourself trying to get it to work. And so I don't mean to be critical or mean, but because I wish I could code on the level that you're coding. But also be kind to yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, Hima, this. It's not that you can't do this. I'm not trying to tell you, hey, this is. I'm just saying there's probably easier solutions. If after all of the things we just said to you, right, if flow doesn't make sense, if using the 2 fields with the process builder doesn't make sense, if really your requirement for me both say, no, Hima, I understand it will take you 2 weeks. I need this to show the question. That's not, you know, that's the requirement. I'm not gonna budge. You're not gonna say no anymore, right? again, as an admin, your goal is as you get requests, you're trying to guide them in the right direction. But sometimes you get a firm push from your boss, and your boss is your boss, so you have to do what they say. So what I would say in this scenario is that your goal is to create a page that can handle everything,
Right.
both for the edit and for the view of all the record types, regardless of what record type they are. And you can do that by using different conditionals on the Visualforce page.
Okay.
So I would take a vastly different approach from what you're doing.
Okay.
Vastly in the sense that I wouldn't try to use the no override. The no override will not work the way you think it will. It will be okay in sense that it will show the record, the standard page layout when you override it, but it won't work as easily as you think it will. Instead, what you need to do is create a Visualforce that handles all of the record types. And we can talk more about how to do this. I want to show you something.
Okay.
Let me show you something. Where is that record? So here's the record, and I'm going to click on Edit the View.
Right.
Come on, little guy. And we can override this to this page that you created, right? And I see you created a view as well.
Yeah. This is the one. Right.
So now when I click on one of those, it should take me to your Visualforce page. And we can see that it has this sfdc.override equals 1.
Right.
Somehow you also added here no override. You added that, I think. That's an interesting.
You can see the tab. It's flickering.
Yeah, hold on a second. I wonder if you have your redirect on this page as well. Yeah, it looks like it. Where is the page with the extension, with the view? PCMH page,
Yeah.
PCMH view. So here's, again, you have your URL redirect. What I think is you need a one-on-one session, but not so much as the Code Clinic is, right? Because the Code Clinic purpose is to try and help you troubleshoot this code.
Okay.
I think what you want is somebody to teach you how to write this the right way.
Okay, no problem. Thanks
right?
for guiding me.
Yeah, no, listen, what I want to say is this. I don't think this is necessarily a Code Clinic type of request because, again, I would love to be able to sit with you on this from scratch, but I travel a lot right now, so I can't do it in New York City. Look, do you have any recommendation on how she can go and get some guidance on doing this?
Help her.
Ooh, boy, not off the top of my head. I'm not particularly adept at Visualforce, so I would just
just kind of a forum to
myself. I would say start in Stack Exchange, posing the question there. Surely somebody else has had to do this, so I feel like there's probably some good code to reverse engineer already out there.
I think Bob Buzzard actually covers it somewhere on his blog a bit.
Who is that? I'm sorry?
Bob Buzzard.
Okay, let's see.
He's an MVP.
AKA Keir Bowden.
Yes, that's his name.
Okay. Like this?
Yes. His book on Visualforce and
Oh,
everything.
okay. I know Kier. Yep.
Yes.
I don't think I've been to his blog in a long time. Do you have you seen anything specific?
I believe I have. It might have been in the Visualforce Development Code book, but I'd have to look again. He covers just about every, weird scenario, or most of the weird scenarios you'd run into quite well.
So, Hima, I think that's a great place for you to start. Get on this blog and just try to read a little bit about what Bowden has to say. I'm just trying to think what is the best idea or best solution, right? I would love to be able to help you. One of the things I say in this Code Clinic definition is, I'm not going to be here to write your code. That's really not what this forum is designed for. I would recommend maybe come to the next Developer User Group session and see if we can find somebody there that has the capacity to help you a little bit and guide you, even if it's during the developer user group.
And actually, the next one could be a pretty good one. I think it's coming up on February 8th, and is going to be a hands-on Lightning components session with Michael Lapino. So,
right.
Lightning components, Visualforce, pretty much pretty close. So yeah, I think if you had some mock code, written out, you'd probably be able to tap Michael and say, hey, can you take a look at this and point out what I need to add in here.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot of approaches to solve what you're trying to do, but it's a much longer conversation than a 45-minute session, unfortunately. Okay, Hima?
Yeah, sorry, I was disconnected and I re-logged in. So.
Oh, okay. So I don't know how much you didn't hear us. We've been talking to you for the last few minutes.
Really? Sorry about that. Actually, it got hanged.
So what was the last thing you heard us say?
About this page saying this Code Clinic is for not helping to write the code, but it's for debugging kind of.
Yeah.
And we can't make everything in 45 minutes.
Yeah, I think this will take more than 45 minutes. Listen, I do recommend come to the next user group, developer user group. I don't know if I'll be there, but even if not, we'll try to make sure that we can connect you with someone that can help you, okay?
Okay, sure, no problem. And I appreciate so much your time and your suggestions.
No problem. I wish we could have solved this quickly, but I think that you have to take a slightly different approach than what you've been trying to do.
Yeah, it's a complex kind of thing, I think.
The funny thing is that the requirement seems really simple. Hey, I just want this label to really, really long, but it's really something that is kind of against what Salesforce out-of-the-box functionality is. You should definitely inspect and try to look into Flow and see if that helps you.
Yeah, I did try with the Flow, but I was not that much expert in that, so I couldn't get that record type into that Flow. So I thought a Visualforce page would be the other option. So I tried that.
Okay, well, again, I recommend come to the next user group. I don't think that we advertised yet the next session, but I think we're finalizing the location and everything right now. So probably over the next week or so, the announcement will come out about the next user group.
And I have it on good authority that it's looking like it'll be the second week of February.
Yep.
That the save the date will go out in a day or two, and we'll be doing it at Arcus. I also just posted a link in the chat to a pretty good developer forum article. It seems like Marty Chang might have put up some links to some really good code you might be able to make use of to get this done. So I see them trying to solve the exact same issue.
Awesome. Here it is. I'm putting it on the screen. Okay, I'll share all of this on the blog post by tomorrow. Okay?
Sure. Thank you so much.
Including the recording of this session.
Great.
Okay, guys. We took a bit longer than expected, but hopefully this was valuable. Arnold, I know you had fun.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I know that you had a little less fun, Hima.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you again for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
I'll be posting this probably sometime tomorrow, and feel free to join us for next week's session.
Thank you so much.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everyone.
Good one.